Hi, I'm Spencer Ziegler.
Hi, I'm Mellisa Smith, and welcome to Data Lit, a podcast for educators by educators. So Spencer, think back to like when you were in the classroom and you knew it was the end of the year and some accountability report was going to come out. What was your gut reaction? Like, how did that make you feel?
So yeah, this is an interesting question because as I reflect back, I mostly remember the anxiety I felt before it showed up. And then I really have very little recollection other than like, oh, it's fine. I'm not getting fired. Okay. That's about all that I can recall in terms of what these reports, their impact on me. So yeah, impact on me like professionally.
Yeah.
Not much impact on me in terms of like stuff for my therapist, more so there. Right. But what about you?
I always find it to be a stressful time.
Yeah.
Right? Because like you said, you've worked so hard throughout the entire year, and this one data point could feel like it can either make you or break you. Mm-hmm. And depending on what your score was or the results and kind of stuff, you take it personally, even though we always tell folks don't take it personally. You can't help but take it personally. And I also felt like, okay, but you give me this data, it has such an emotional effect, but it's not quite as useful as I'd want it to be, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're not telling me much, like what can I do differently? I still have to kind of go on a hunt to kind of figure out, all right, what do I need to change with my lessons or my instruction to kind of have a different result. Mm-hmm. And so that sort of brings us to when you think of like the world of accountability and like school improvement, it could sometimes feel like data is rarely giving us like this clear path or this clear action as to what we need to be doing. And so this episode today, we kind of want to see if we can bridge those two worlds, the worlds between accountability, because we need it, right? Yep. We have to have it. And this school improvement world, right? Mm-hmm. Like this continuous cycle of improving for teaching and learning and see how we can bridge those two worlds. So today, you and I are going to unpack an article titled Strengthening the Ties Between Accountability and School Improvement that was published by the National Center of Improvement of Educational Assessment. And we'll provide a link in our show notes. And in that article, they sort of highlight these principles in that blog post about how you can better tie those two worlds. And so I liked how the article started with this sort of medical doctor analogy that kind of highlights that the measures of themselves don't equal improvement. Mm-hmm. And I had to kind of sit with that, which is true when I go to my doctor. Just them telling me to do better, like when I get my test results, like I actually have to put things in place for it to work. And so let's kind of unpack those principles that the article talk about to see, what can we glean and how can we, again, bridge those worlds between accountability and school improvement. So the first principle they talked about was to build and sustain systems of collaboration. Yeah. So in essence, they said supporting improvement must be a collaborative effort among education professionals in multiple roles. And I like how they talk about it's important to break down silos between the accountability specialists, so like people in our department, and improvement specialists. So like I think like our coaches and like in our district, we actually have improvement specialists with the senior administrators for the different areas. How can we break down the silos and have more shared collaboration is the word that they use, and you'll hear us talk about it a lot in this episode. Yeah. They really highlighted shared collaboration and what that needs to look like to do this work and bringing it forward. The other thing that they talk about that I thought it was interesting is that it has to be systematic. So they kind of talked about this idea that improvements can't be left up to a single person, because if that person leaves, we've all seen cases where one person leaves and everything falls apart. So again, it has to be systematic. It has to be, what are the things that we're going to put in place that will outlast any person?
Yeah, the systems, I think, is the key word for this one. And it made me think of an article we've referenced a bunch. We even did a podcast episode on it, 5 Good Ways to Talk About Data from Educational Leadership. We'll drop in the show notes. Mm-hmm. And they talk about these norms to set things like students are the shared responsibility of everyone.
Yeah.
And, trust rather than suspicion, all these kind of pieces there. And I was thinking about that with all these principles, but for this first one in particular. And one of the things that stood out is that you can't wait until the high stakes accountability end of year stuff comes out to put these in place. For it to be a systems, you have to practice with the small stuff so you're ready for the big stuff.
Oh, I agree.
And it's easier to do this with some of that like kind of more low stakes common formative assessments and practice there, because all these data sources, and I remember this in the classroom, there's always going to be a little anxiety popping up whenever you get any test result, be it in school, doctor, whatever it might be.
Right.
But we are who we pretend to be. And the more you practice, like, okay, that's a natural response. That's okay. But let me remember these norms when I talk about it with my PLC, with my administrator, with my senior administrator, whatever it might be, so that you're ready. So yeah, building this at a systematic level so that you can kind of overcome some of that gut response that was really my only recollection of these big reports.
And I think too, that makes me think that when we talk about the students are the shared responsibility of everyone, I think sometimes we have to think at least at our level, the schools, all of the schools are a shared responsibility of all of us, right? So it's an entire system, right? We work in a school system made up of individual students, made up of individual schools. So how can we do that? It's easy to get kind of isolated into individuals, but again, how do we get the whole system moving? So kind of extrapolating out and seeing what does shared responsibility look like at even that level. So what was your next principle?
So also is about systems. So this one was invest in ongoing systems of improvement. So this one kind of talked about, 3 key questions.
Yeah.
It was revolving around, how do we know how schools are doing? And I think that schools that now we can kind of ramp up or down depending on your viewpoint. How do we know how classes are doing? How do we know how districts are doing? Whatever it might be. How do we know how the entities are doing? What are the most promising practices to support improvement? And what is the impact of the supports we provide? And they stress here to do so, you really want to define the characteristics of effective school improvement plans or, classroom improvement plans, district improvement plans, whatever that level is you're looking at. So this can be, systematically putting together exemplars and supports and resources when you're developing these plans, but also when you're implementing throughout the year, those quarterly reviews, whatever it might be. I think there's an area where like our senior administrators for the area superintendents do really stellar job in Wake County of providing those resources and person of contact and connecting with other schools. So that's, it's like Wake County is a big district. And sometimes I think it's easy for us to see that as a flaw rather than a feature. Like, it's a big ship, it's hard to turn around or something. Instead of thinking about like, how do we maximize all those systems and supports and people in contact, there. And thankfully, I think we do have some great examples like the senior administrators that really help out with these.
I'd like to, for that principle, how they talked about it's nice to kind of have a clearinghouse. And that made me think of like in our department. So we have a team, the program accountability team.
Yep.
And what I was thinking, like a clearinghouse could be access to like those internal reports or external reports that staff members have access to kind of see what does work best. And so, we can put a link to that off of our department website. But again, that is also a place where if folks want to know what have other people been doing and what are the impacts of the work they've been doing, there's expertise within our department that can also like shine a light for others as well.
Yeah. And it strikes me that with this one and a few of these really, it's about developing this stuff, but it's also about communicating it in a clear and approachable manner to those that actually need it. Making sure that our departments aren't working in silos, that we're coordinating and that we're presenting the right stuff in the right manner at the right time for schools.
Well, that goes nicely with the third principle, which is support effective interpretation and use. And essentially, I love that one because it is all about data literacy and clear reporting, right? accountability data is useless if educators can't understand the information or turn it into insights. And I think as a district, we've been really trying to be intentional in the ways that we support schools and central office staff in terms of helping them, making sure that not only do they have access to the data, but when they have the data, they can make sense of it. And so that is always a key part of it. Even when we were talking about, how do you build a data culture? Access is one thing, but making sure they understand what's in front of them so that they can then make right decisions. Like a lot of people think data decisions. There's a lot of stuff in between that happens. And I think in this district, we are fortunate enough, like you said, to provide expertise to kind of help people go from one to the next.
Yeah. And so there are some times when you're just giving people the raw data, the raw reports, and helping them read. But there are other times in which you are translating it to some degree.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to look through this 80-page document. Let me kind of translate it and kind of boil down for your particular role, for your particular use case, what you need to know. And then it becomes an art of being able to, like with all translation, and if you're interested in this in a philosophical angle, I recommend the novel Babel by R.F. Kuang. It's fantastic.
Okay.
But how do you translate something without losing the essence around it? Because every translation, there's always something lost. In the novel, it's that something lost becomes this like magical thing. It's
or something added by the person doing the translation.
Yeah. So at translation, there is no perfect translation.
Yeah.
So how do you just translate the bits and pieces that are essential without losing the essence?
Or adding interpretation.
Yeah.
That's a good one. All right, what about the next principle?
So that was bolster school and district improvement capacity.
Yeah.
So this, they stress it's important to identify areas of improvement, but you can't just stop there. Just saying like, oh, this is the thing that we need to do is not enough. You have to describe how to improve, but then also, as we've been talking about, provide resources and support in a way that is useful for the end user. And I like they use this, they talk about the principle of reciprocity here, that every performance expectation carries an accompanying responsibility to provide capacity to meet that expectation.
Right.
Without that, that's just a mandate that can result in nothing but anxiety. And for this, and we can drop in the show notes, there's a resource that we provide, a data considerations document.
Oh, yeah.
That hopes to kind of do this and maybe serves as a model when we're talking about this. So this lists the different data sources that are available. It includes a resources column. It also includes questions that someone might ask as they're interrogating what this data says, broken down by role. Because the fact is, there's a lot of data, and not every educator needs to fully grapple with every single piece of educational data that's out there. That we're just going to burn people out there, and you're just going to get paradox of choice and not know what to actually act on.
Right.
So one piece of accountability data might be used differently by a teacher when they're thinking about, okay, how can I find out, go to the domain summary to figure out which domain to kind of teach differently. Then a different on the instructional leader positions within a school, the principals and all those, when they think about, okay, what are the big trends that we can kind of build systems and capacity for? And then come differently again at the district level, those overarching kind of trends that we need to think of how we're doing kind of unified professional learning or something like that.
Yeah.
So thinking about with this, when you're improving that capacity, what does each person need? And differentiating the support based on that.
Yeah, I kind of, when I was reading that one, in my head, it was like, you can't just tell folks do better.
Yeah.
Right? You kind of have to show them how to do better. And I feel sometimes our accountability reports kind of give that sense of, oh, okay, this is where you are, do better.
Yeah.
And it is up to us as educators to kind of figure out, well, how do we do that? And so how can our support systems, our school improvement systems, do the how? That's the part that we're trying to unpack to figure out, how do we get better so that we could see different kinds of results, right? And so I think that is a key part of it. Similarly, in the classroom, when we tell teachers, you just can't tell kids or give kids a grade and say, yep, here's your grade, now do better.
Yep.
Like, what does your success criteria look like? I think at the macro level, we have to kind of define what does success criteria look like, and then map it out. And then that's sort of our plan of action for, okay, let's try these things. so that we can get better.
Yeah, and to do that, I think you have to transition from that satellite level of data to the map level of data, because that's where it starts to get more specific. And I think that kind of leads us to the fifth point.
Yes, which was connect information to school supports. So, our traditional ESSA data is very limited. And so we will always say we need more timely and actionable data. I mean, the fact that we're in October and we're still getting results from the 24-25 year is kind of difficult, right? And so, the 25-26 year have started and people are moving forward. So, how do we provide these frequent checks or opportunities to learn? How do we make sense of that data, but also kind of marry it with where we are now and use data or access data or collect data that's more actionable to where we are right now to kind of keep improving.
Yeah, there's, to kind of paraphrase a line that SAS sometimes uses, accountability reports tell you what happened, not the how or the why.
Yes.
So it can serve as a compass of sorts to point you in a direction, but then as you go down that direction, you're kind of using some of that data that's closer to the learner, closer to the instruction. Be it going from that summative to interim to formative level, because that's where you get closer to what you can do differently the next kind of day. Or you can kind of think of it also in terms of like Victoria Bernhardt's model. You have the student learning data, be it summative, interim, formative, but then also layering that with some demographic data. For whom was this working? For whom was it not? Who are the groups that are getting these resources? Who are the groups that are on this particular bus that might be missing instruction time?
What is that process data?
Yeah, which then the third, that process data, what were the steps that were in place to get those results? And then that perception data, how do students feel about their learning environment and curriculum, all those kind of things. So this one, moving down to that more localized data.
Well, the things that you can act upon, like when we do training around the 4 measures, a lot of people think about, the student learning data and they think about the demographic data.
Yeah.
But we're always encouraging folks, where is your process data? And have you thought about how you will collect it? Because that is where your actions, those are the things that you can change. And that's where your locus of control lives. Like that's where you have agency to change, to move some things, to make a difference so that you can see differences in the student learning, right? Because you can't change your demographic. You can't change it. It can change, but you can't change it. But that's a place where, yes, if you look at your processes and decide, how am I going to collect it and what processes do I want to collect on? That is a really good sweet spot for folks to kind of live in.
Well said.
So those were the 5 principles that we talked about. And so what's a final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
I suppose that there's a temptation, and there's probably systems push us into it, to view these things in isolation. Like we look at the satellite data just with satellite data. We look at the common formative data just as that. But the fact is that you need both. A world where it's just this giant satellite accountability data, but no formative, then you're never able to act on it, at a local level to change those results. Conversely, a world in which you only have that localized data, but you're missing that kind of big picture, that big satellite, those accountability data, then we might be missing some of the systematic issues that just can't be solved purely from the ground up, because you're going to have every single educator, all 10,000 in Wake County, trying to do the same thing independently.
Right.
So you need kind of both. You're marrying that accountability data, figuring out what it says, then going down the direction it sends you down, so that you can start making some changes at the local level. What about you?
I think that message of shared collaboration is what kind of stuck for me, because accountability, again, tends to have this notion that it's a destination. And I think this article shines a light on how can we use it as a lever for change, a lever for continuous improvement. Like, yes, it is, we talk about this and we say it's autopsy data.
Yeah.
But it's not, because it's autopsy data, doesn't mean that it is less meaningful. So how can we find ways to use it for its purpose, for a particular audience, and add to it, like you said, other pieces of data, your map and your street data, to really make that change, to really engage in that continuous cycle of improvement.
Yeah, I like that. And that's not going to just happen organically on its own, because if teachers are anything like me, their anxiety is going to kind of override their ability to say like, okay, I'm not going to take this personal. I'm going to think about a shared responsibility. I'm going to move beyond just that initial label, and I'm going to think, instructionally, all those kind of things there. So it takes, every system is perfectly aligned for the results that it gets.
Correct.
So you have to put in different systems, because that was the word. Like if we did a word cloud from this article, that's probably the systems. One that's popping up in kind of giant font. You have to put systems in place at the district level, like we're hoping to do, but also at the school and classroom level, so people can kind of override that initial human response.
Agreed. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this episode. And I think what we would like to do next as a follow-up to this is to have a panel discussion with some folks in our district to kind of talk about what does that look like, or what does the bridging of accountability and school improvement look like. So I want to thank Lukas Brandon from Green Hope High School for a theme song for this episode. You will find all of the links in our show notes. If you need to reach us, you can do so at datalit@wcpss.net. Spencer, thank you for a really good discussion. And until next time, folks, bye.
Take care.